Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we are back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Friday, November 25th, aka Black Friday, so the internet is likely to be somewhat slow. Particularly, I've been noticing Steam has not been running particularly well since its autumn sale began. And yeah, as far as Black Friday sales go, I think I'm kind of done already. Like, there's just Amazon Prime Day, Black Friday sales stuff is not particularly worth it, particularly if you've also already done Prime Day and Black Friday early access, and you just had two other times earlier in the year, which ideally that would have moved. You may notice here I played a little bit off screen. Ideally that would have moved like some of the purchases to be in the third quarter of the year instead of the fourth quarter of the year, but it really didn't. Even the like Prime Day is still just too close to the first half of the year, whereas ideally I'd like to see something happen in March as far as a big sale. But yeah, they don't do that, and most of the Prime Day Amazon Prime sales are just not really great deals. Major Nelson did tweet out this 2 terabyte SanDisk Extreme Portable SSD up to 1050 megabytes per second USB-C device that at some point allegedly was $460 and is now $150. Now, arguably, though, I think even if you were to believe that this is a good SSD, which SanDisk can make good SSDs, so that's believable, but I would imagine the portable ones are from the B tier or C tier as far as the chips that they manufacture. It being a external SSD, you really are going to have to plug it into some very specific devices to get that kind of throughput. You're going to be plugging it into a computer or maybe a very high processing cell phone, but probably not a cell phone at all, because I think you're just going to have a CPU bottleneck of some sort. And this is not something I've really investigated enough to speak with any authority on, but I would suspect that any USB-C connection is going to either be directly connected to the CPU, or it's going to go through the CPU North Bridge or even a CPU South Bridge, and then you're going to have a bottleneck there to get the massive amount of throughput to get to that 1050 megabytes per second, whereas most people are going to be plugging this in through an adapter outside of the USB-C connectors into something that's just not USB-C 3.2 Gen 2. They've kind of abandoned that labeling also, so that might be an argument that maybe that's why it's on sale, is because USB, after screwing it up 2 or 3 times with their naming conventions, have straight up decided to finally just have people announce their capabilities. So it's going to be going forward, it's going to be USB-C for the connector, and then it will be called USB 3.2 or higher, and then after that you're going to just actually put the throughput. And once that becomes the more standard way of doing things, in which the throughput is literally just part of the description of devices, or the recommended way in which a lot of companies are going to do it, then it'll be way easier to compare apples to apples. The idea of Gen 1, Gen 2, and just like confusing it. I mean, USB was for a second there going to be about 3 times as worse as the Xbox One X debacle or Series X nonsense, as far as the Xbox naming convention. So yeah, this might be a decent SSD if you really needed an external SSD, which you usually don't need an external SSD. And I can't help but suspect that you could find either right now or later a 4 terabyte or bigger external hard drive, not SSD, just a spinning disk hard drive, that would be about the same price at $150. And for most people, I think that's the case. What's ironic here is, as far as Major Nelson promoting the sale, is that it highlights the incompatibility that you really would have with this kind of device anyways. For the Xbox Series S or Xbox Series X, because their problem with trying to have faster speed storage their solution to that was to create a proprietary connector and proprietary memory, which that noticeably really hasn't been embraced by anybody, and I don't think will go on sale at all until the Xbox Series X stops being something that people would buy, probably 8 years from now. And even then, I'm not sure that many of the proprietary memory connectors would work. If Microsoft had come out with that connector and made it a standard that was open source with no license, then maybe there would have been a chance of something happening there. I'm a little surprised somebody hasn't just made an M2 adapter to plug into those connectors. 8-bit controllers, kind of on sale. I did buy Kirby and the Forgotten Land on a little bit of a discount, $10-15 off for first-party Nintendo titles, about all I can get. And I would really have to question whether I can justify getting even one more Nintendo Switch game. I need to get back into playing my Nintendo Switch and burning through the couple of games. I think I saw Metroid Dread for a brief second there, was discounted on the Lightning deal, and I missed that. I would have liked to have gotten Metroid Dread. But honestly, I don't think I could justify even buying 3 Nintendo games for the entirety of next year. Computer components and computers, yeah, there's a couple, but mostly kind of nothing's on sale. If you're a Lego fan, there are discounted Lego $5 discounts, which means if you have VIP points, you can spend those VIP points to get a better a $5 discount at a cheaper price. Usually it's 650 VIP points to get $5 off your next purchase, and this was like 160, so that is actually an extremely good deal. But there's nothing that I directly saw as far as Lego sales that caught my eye. Right now there's just not any sets that I could justify buying after already having quite a lot. I probably have over a year's worth of Legos, plus I have a lot of organization and decorating and just straight up dusting at this point that I need to do on my now massive, ever-growing Lego collection. The actual sales that Amazon has done have been like a buy 3 for the price of 2 books on select books. That's really, really difficult to sort through, and the best thing I could say is if you actually wanted specific books, add them to your cart and then go check that specific page with the sale, and you'd probably find that through slickdeals.net. They also had a spend $50 on Amazon Basics products and get 25% off, which is something but not particularly a lot. Very basic thing, paper towels and such, toilet paper. But honestly, that puts you in a unique position to buy things that you normally would not see on sale on Black Friday. Things that would normally just be like groceries, staple groceries items, and things like that. Although your mileage will vastly differ if you have a cheaper grocery store than what the Amazon Basics paper towels and toilet papers are charging. As far as Walmart, I really didn't see anything. The Target deal for the Xbox Series S, it's basically all the deals that I talked about on Wednesday are the same deals so far. Something wild could happen, but I'm not really expecting it to. And I'm not really expecting anything to happen over the weekend, and I'm not really expecting anything to happen on Cyber Monday. I think in a lot of ways the idea of Cyber Monday is completely dead by this point, because it is just the default assumption that you will be shopping online and that you can shop online through your own internet instead of having to go to the office on Monday and shop then. So yeah, it's very possibly that Cyber Monday is just a holiday that they're going to pretend like is still a thing, when it really isn't. And honestly, Amazon Prime really overwhelms as far as if you were going to do any shopping. So unless you are actively boycotting Amazon, which fair enough if you want to. I did hear that potentially there's going to be a strike from the Amazon workers, which, you know what, if anybody deserves a strike, it's almost certainly the Amazon workers. But yeah, unless you were actively trying to avoid shopping online or shopping on Amazon specifically, you'd be so overwhelmed by Black Friday or Saturday or Sunday after that by the time you got around to Monday, you probably wouldn't want to do any more shopping. I suppose there is a scenario out there in which there are actual families that would like to get together and have Thanksgiving meals and hang out for the entire weekend and not get on each other's nerves. But I don't know if that is the majority of people. I imagine this year there's more fights between families than ever. The Steam Autumn Sale is happening, and even it really isn't much of a deal. I suppose I have until the 29th to really think about it, but it's not emphasizing the point store at all. As far as I can tell, you don't get anything at all for buying, or anything extra for buying games. I think you maybe get points at the point store no matter whenever you buy a game, but there's just no emphasis on that. They are asking people to nominate the Steam Awards, and so I've gone here through this and made my picks, and I've mostly tried to just pick. This is really awful as far as trying to read that background. I'll try to go with what I think has a legitimate chance of being actually nominated, except for my usual joke nomination. And inherently, there's so few games that actually even came out this year that it's almost impossible to not nominate some of the biggest of the things. And it was actually very hard to even just find games that came out in 2023, a list of games that came out in 2023 to potentially nominate anything. Alright. This feels like I should be able to piece something in like 4 things. Yep. And I guess the question then comes down to, what can I do with summoning 4 things? Let's see what this happens. So, for Game of the Year, I picked Elden Ring. I think that's going to win. I think that deserves a win. For VR Game of the Year, they have fully thrown in the towel and just allowed you to straight up skip it. By the way, as far as possible ones you could select, it suggested, like, Steam is just not loading right now. It suggested like 3 games that I had played recently that maybe came out in 2023. For the continuing gag of Labor of Love, which is really just me continuing the gag because I'm trying to get the badge, I picked Time Clickers, which honestly I have not played Time Clickers in 2 or 3 years at all, or played as in even let it run in the background. The joke of actually playing it and getting the runtime up got stale and just wasn't worth potentially wasting electricity to do that. I still have yet to figure out what this card actually does. It doesn't seem to negate cards, nor does it seem to destroy cards in every attempt I try to use it on. Right. Kill a couple of these. At least that way we'll destroy some cards. For Better with Friends, I chose Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, which, yeah, that feels kind of right. Best Outstanding Visual Style Award, which, yeah, you can't even read this, let alone follow the actual guidance. I chose Spider-Man Remastered. Most innovative gameplay, I chose Stray. I don't know if there really is even innovative gameplay. Best game I suck at is Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. They are actually making a push for Game of the Year as far as Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. But I honestly cannot make the argument for a second that Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel should be Game of the Year, because it's missing too many features. It's not treating its audience quite well enough. It's got a lot of cards, but not a lot of good ways to earn it. I really wish Master Duel was closer to year 3 or 4 of Hearthstone when it launched, instead of being as bare bones as it is. We'll try to throw in another anime nod by just randomly picking Persona 5 Royale for best soundtrack, which I don't know if that's the case. Outstanding story rich game award is God of War. I think that's a decent pick. Noticeably though, this is also picking a game that is fairly old that just got released to Steam, which this is like the one thing that Steam could do with its Steam Awards is it could say, you know what, if you're going to do a delay or some kind of exclusive and not be on the Steam storefront, then we might highlight this game years later, which doesn't really hurt the game, but it creates a difference. Whereas the game awards themselves, which just give out game awards to games that were actually released in 2023, can have that more general focus. I chose for Sit Back and Relax awards Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, just because I wanted to highlight that. And then Best Game on the Go award, I picked Pokemon Marvel Snap. I almost said Pokemon Snap, which I guess there is a Pokemon Snap game. And yeah, that's mostly just to assume that other people might do that. And as far as like game on the go, again, either you've got the Steam Deck or it's a cross-platform game. Marvel Snap is a cross-platform game that I'm sure you can play on the Steam Deck also. And see, by doing all of those things, you get 4 tiers for this badge, and that's it. Like, that's pretty much the entire autumn events. It's just nominate games if you like for the Steam Awards, which the Steam Awards don't have any prestige to them and don't really matter. It's a real mistake, I would say, that they don't trot out Gabe Newell in front of a green screen and have him introduce a Game Awards presentation and then get some video game developers to come up and present awards to other people. And just try to have some sort of event around it, instead of it being this lazy online only thing. Yeah. Even if they were just gonna get, I don't know, streamers to be the presenters, that would be fine too. I think there's something about these being 0-0s that makes it do something crazy. Let's summon this, contributing 2 of these here. Seriously? Well, that did something. Spring King Dragon, we'll see if that works. So yeah, as far as the autumn sale, the Steam Awards is done. And then as far as the autumn sale is concerned, I think I had a longer list of games on this, and then halfway through it just kind of forgot. It's the website here needs some work. Steam does, in general, because yeah, there's no points here. You're being rewarded for it all. It doesn't like cross connect. So if I'm shopping on the Steam app on my phone on my account, and then I go to the Steam app on my computer, the things in the cart on the Steam app on the phone won't be in the cart on the Steam app on the computer, nor will either one of those synchronize with the cart if I go to a browser. So I could have several different carts and it just doesn't remember it. It's all apparently being done by cookies locally, when it really should be more of a session cookie or a database thing. There's clearly ways to do this. When I shop in the cart of, like, when I'm put something in the shopping cart in Amazon, it handles that perfectly fine. And most stores that I interact with, I think, would handle that perfectly fine. If I had two phones with the same app, I don't even know if that would work. So yeah, I'm trying to convince myself not to buy anything, basically. The amount of stuff that I could buy as a pick is not that big. You have Raft here, and a lot of this is going to be specifically unique to just the games I don't have versus games I would like to have. Certainly too, but Raft here was finally out of early access. It's $13.39 for the game being relatively new out of early access. That's not a terrible deal. You can get Inscription, the beginner's deck, which for me includes Inscription and the Hex, but would include a third game for other people, and the price difference there makes it a little bit cheaper. I think like 40 cents cheaper to buy these two games than it is to buy Inscription by itself. I would say generally, if you don't have the Witcher Wild Hunt Game of the Year edition, now is a perfect time to buy it for $10, so maybe I'll just grab that before they come out with the HD free update. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night's DLC for $5, and then Bloodstained Ritual of the Night and Blasphemous combined for $18.21 would be a good deal. As far as cheap games, I have a 49-cent game called Raptor Call of the Shadows. This is a game that I played when I was early in PC gaming, and it has some slight relevancy to me. I'm gonna hit the 0-0 here and see what happens. We have someone on the chat asking, what is the most easiest boss fight you've ever done in video games you've played that don't use teams? This is an interesting, long, I guess, question prompt would be what you'd call it. Well, I will say, as having recently pre-recorded footage for Resident Evil 4 on the 7th or so playthrough of that, there are some very easy boss fights, and inherently there are at least a couple of games that have extremely easy boss fights that are jokes, where it's just like a cutscene and you don't fight them at all. There's got to be at least a couple of games where the second to last boss is the real boss, and then the final boss is super easy. Can't think of any like that, but somebody's got to have pulled that trigger and done that. Inherently, for my gameplay style, as I am more looking for story and narrative and just trying to see the artistic creation there, I'm usually playing games on easy anyways. So I run far more often into the problem of games being too hard even on easy than running into the problem of games being too easy or boss fights being too easy. Like, generally if something is easy, I am more than happy to take that victory and move on with my life. I think the core of Aquamarine Dragon's question here is, well, what boss fights have I found disappointingly easy? And there aren't really a lot of them. Like, most games, if they're good games at all, tend to not have disappointingly easy boss fights in them. I could say like the most disappointing boss fight that is just bad but not particularly easy would be in Bioshock 1. That boss fight was, I think, made by a completely different team. It's not unheard of for boss fights to be handed over to a third-party developer, and when you get outside of your traditional run and gun type games and action games, Minesweeper doesn't really have a boss fight or anything like that, so there is inherently a lot of people that don't ever make it to the end of video games anyways. They don't make it to credits, so they don't make it to the final boss fight. So the people that fall off before they get to a boss fight or the final boss fight are usually the kinds of people that would need a boss fight to be a little bit more easy. And so since that's the audience you're going to lose anyways, the boss fights tend to feel like boss fights. I gotta think that there's a Zelda game that has done the trick of a boss fight being too easy. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there really is an answer there. I just off the top of my head, without really going through a list of every single game I've ever played, which that would be a lot of games, I can't think of a single game where the boss fight was too easy for me that I didn't care about it. Inherently, even if a boss fight was easy, it's usually a boss fight that has like quick time events or just a cutscene, and then I'm satisfied because they focused on telling a story. In Bioshock, I guess, getting back to Andrew Ryan, the spoiler for Bioshock 1, Andrew Ryan literally forces the player to beat him to the death with a golf club in a cutscene, so that was obviously an incredibly easy boss fight because it wasn't really a fight, it was just a cutscene. But yeah, that I can't give any more answer to that question. It's just I play games on easy in general, so anything a game would have to be really stupidly easy for me to complain about it, because I also play like Lego games, and even the Lego games are fine as far as the difficulty in the boss fights of that. So If I'm playing kids games, then I'm still happy with the level of difficulty there. It just highlights that I'm not interested in difficulty. And weirdly, I would also say most people nowadays who would be interested in difficulty are not looking for it from the AI anyways. They're looking for it in multiplayer against other players. So the idea of creating a particularly difficult boss isn't necessary, and the idea of making a particularly easy boss is doubly unnecessary. They just can go right in the middle and people will be satisfied. Anyways, back to showing off what I was thinking about buying, but I'm trying to convince myself not to. Like, you can get Dead Rising 1 for $6. I feel like Capcom here probably is not going to discount these games much more than that ever. Stalker 1, Shadow of Chernobyl for $5.99 would maybe make some sense. I'm trying to find some games that would be like the first of a series in the insane ambition that I'd actually have time to go through the entire series anytime soon. This game, Lines Infinite, is at a shocking 29 cents, which I thought 49 cents was the minimum you could charge for a game on Steam. I can't help but assume that either Valve has changed the way it's done or they've done some weirdness here, because I would have thought that Valve and Steam would have taken 30 cents on the first dollar by default with an additional 3% of the total sales price. So for 30 cents, I would have assumed that would have been 31 cents on, well, on a 31 cents maybe, or 39 cents on the dollar. Yeah, it feels like Valve's cut is higher than what 29 cents would be. So I don't know how that got that cheap. God of Robo is a black and white Metroidvania parody for $1.99. I think that's worth it. I want to get Resident Evil 2 Deluxe Edition, and honestly some of this is frankly me begging for somebody to friend me and gift me these games more than me wanting to really spend the money, because I'm just too over budget this year already. But yeah, since I just played Resident Evil 4, getting back to the remakes and playing Resident Evil 2 would be the way to loop around there. That being said, I still have either I don't own Resident Evil 0, or I do have Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1. I probably need to check whether I own Resident Evil 0. I don't own the Prey Mooncrush DLC for $5. That's probably fine. Like, the problem certainly is that there's some inflation going on here too, and that the idea of getting games really cheap for like $1.99 or 99 cents, that's no longer on the table just because of inflation, and also because I have just already purchased all the games that were 69 cents or $1.99. I'd like to get Katamari Damacy Reroll for $7.49. It's still a little expensive there, but this is such a niche game while still being somewhat relevant. The Raven Remastered for $4.99 I could say no to. I'll just click that, although there was a danger of me clicking remove there, and that reloading this and getting rid of everything in the cart. Alice Madness Returns, which secretly includes American McGee's Alice, the first game, for $4.99, is a good deal to buy right now because they're about to announce Alice Alice Asylum, the third game in the series, or at least try to announce that, in the sense that the design Bible, according to American McGee, is coming out in January, around January of 2023, and once the design Bible is out there, things potentially could start being the process of being developed, because he wants to just hand over development to a third-party company. Now, I don't know if maybe secretly the only way the game would come out in the next 2 or 3 years is if secretly Alice Asylum has been in development this whole time, or there's been a game in development that they could reskin as Alice Asylum, which I'm not sure people would be very satisfied with that. It really would have to be that it was been secretly in development this whole time, which that would have been the better response. But then that would also have to make American McGee admit that he's been basically lying about how far along the design Bible and the general ideas have been. People will not understand the idea that a game could have been in development with 3D platforming that would work very well in the American McGee Alice series, but the actual characters and the actual story were all still being worked on in the design Bible. Because what you'd be effectively saying is that a game with just a bunch of wireframe silhouettes was being developed with 3D platforming and hack and slash fighting, and possibly even some boss fights, and there may have been some expectation that would have been Alice Asylum, but the actual 3D models and the actual story and the actual items and everything that is in the design Bible at the moment would have to be, you'd have to say that was being added after that point, after January. So arguably, maybe you still have some time here. You probably do have 2 or 3 years. Madness Returns was released in 2011, so you're talking 11 years. It really would have been better if a third game had secretly been developed. A third game was definitely teased at the end of Madness Returns. But yeah, if the game has been secretly in development, it's been in development hell for 11 years. One thing I heard, and I'll assume it's true from the YouTuber who said it, is that Resident Evil 4 actually had at least 4 reboots, or 4 iterations, 3 reboots, before it was actually came out. So there was apparently a lot of development hell there. A game called Haunting Ground, which you can't get anywhere. It only came out on the PlayStation 2, really, and then there was a special Japanese-only PS3 version that you can't access anymore, download anymore, for a game called Haunting Ground. And actually the dog in Resident Evil 4 is the dog from Haunting Ground, who plays a much bigger role as a companion. Unfortunately, Haunting Ground came out just like a couple months after Resident Evil 4, or before Resident Evil 4, I don't remember which one I heard, and people did not buy it, and it did not sell. The other games that were going to be Resident Evil 4 led to the creation of Onimusha, and I think one of them didn't lead to anything, but Devil May Cry was based on Onimusha, so it's even crazier of a story, really, to say that in potentially 4 attempts to make Resident Evil 4, you also ended up with Haunting Ground and Devil May Cry. Anyways, moving back to shopping, I covered Castlevania Lord of Shadow 2, but I didn't have the Revelation DLC, so getting that for $1.99 would be nice, and then at some point I would have to decide if I wanted to jump back to that game to cover that DLC. In general, I want to just always have all the DLC for all the DLC that's good for every game I have, but mostly I want to have it before I play the game. I'd love to have re-own Heroes of Might and Magic 3 in HD edition. This would be a very hard game to do anything other than a quick look on, but for $3.74 just owning it, I think is more than fair. I still have like the Heroes of Might and Magic 3 Gold Edition CDs probably, but getting those to run from their original installers is questionable. It may be a lot more work, and just having it in the Steam library is the way to go. There is definitely a level of stupidity to buying a game a second time, even if it was 10 or 15 years plus ago that Heroes of Might and Magic 3 came out. And it is weird that Heroes of Might and Magic 3 is really the only one you would recommend people play, not 1 or 2 or 4 or 5. But it's relevant to me, and I think relevant to enough people to justify that. And noticeably, some of these games are not that expensive, but they certainly add up too. This is the thing that happens in any shopping cart, is that but particularly on Steam, everything is like $0.99 or $0.49, $0.74. So you might as well just take every dollar that you're focusing on. So $4.99, you might as well just immediately bump that up to $5 and not even look at whether it's 0.00 or 0.99, because on average everything is going to go up $1. Rise Son of Rome is $2.40. It's rated very positively. It didn't sell very well. It was kind of like an Xbox One launch game, but at $2.50, a failed game that is rated well is not a bad thought. Whereas Hob here is just arguably maybe a little too new, and that at $5 it's maybe asking a little too much. It's definitely asking too much at $20, but even at $5, this has always been my situation as far as buying games and covering games on Steam, is that it's just so much cheaper to buy something from like 2014 for $2.50 versus something from 2017, 3 years difference, for $5. Snowball is a pinball snow thing. I thought thematically that might be interesting for 74 cents. I want to get PC Building Simulator and show that off. I think in general getting PC Building Simulator is a good idea for anybody into PC gaming, so you could go down the process of at least repairing, if not building a PC, becoming self-sufficient. There are a lot of DLC for PC Building Simulator, but I'm not sure any of the DLC actually gives you components more than it just changes the appearance of your workshop. And so I don't think there's a real reason to buy the DLC originally, as each DLC is about $5. We already talked about Resident Evil 2 in the description. I want to get Darksiders Genesis just because I finished Darksiders 3. It's $7.49 and it's from 2019. Arguably, probably not really worth it. You could probably wait on that one. Then my lovely daughter here has a free DLC on top of this called the Inquisitor. That's not in the cart, but this is $3.74, and it's a game I'd like to play. It's a kind of a more niche game. So is that everything that I'd potentially consider spending? Even at that, it's not that much. It's barely $100, but I am arguing to myself mentally about just putting it off until the winter sale, because you're just not getting anything for buying a game right now. All you're doing is locking in the price, which the price could go down, the price could go up. As long as you have a decent list of games you actually want to own, there will just be more games, different games possibly, or the same games possibly, discounted at the next Steam sale. What would really shock some people into spending money is if Valve said they weren't going to do any sales at all and they'd skipped a sale. That would shock people quite a bit, and maybe if they came out and said that this sale was the last sale of the year and that they have no intention of doing any other sales this year, that would probably shock me into spending money. But it's about excuse me, that's about all they could do, is threaten me with a stick more than a carrot. The carrots have become as sweet as possible. More and more stores need to just move their sales around the years to different times frames. It just doesn't really work to have everything around Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So yeah. Of course, the problem here also of e-begging, which is in saying like, hey, I'd like for somebody to friend me on Steam and gift me some of these games, is I guess you could certainly do that without any problem, but there would be like a slight danger there if I purchased it for myself at the same time as someone gifted it to me, but that probably wouldn't happen. And I can't gift this right now because of the Inscription beginners deck being specialized as an offer, since I already own one of the 3 games in that bundle. If I remove this, I could just click purchase as gift and send that to a friend. And I'm not saying all of this, but if somebody wants to support me just 49 cents and give me Raptor Call of the Shadows, that's perfectly fine. Or they could look at my wish list and gift me any game off the wish list, and it's perfectly fine. Some of those games on the wish list, though, are definitely things that I'm not that interested in. And they're just kind of extra things I'm keeping an eye on. And that's the thing I noticed more than anything while going through the wish list and spending more of my time shopping on Steam than Amazon or anything else for Black Friday. I even decided to do like grocery shopping and just try to distract myself away from some of the other shopping possibilities. But yeah, going through the Steam wishlist, there was a lot of games there that were not well reviewed, and I'm hoping I didn't remove anything that had some special reason why it was on the wish list, and I'd made some kind of exception to why it was on the wish list. But I did remove like 4 or 5 games just because looking at the reviews, looking at what they looked like, it didn't seem like there was a lot of relevance there. There's also a lot of JRPGs on my wish list, which I possibly will never play. They're if I were to purchase them. There's a lot of fighting games, which I haven't tried to play any fighting games. And in general, I just have so many games in the first place that it's kind of hard to say any game I bought now I would get around to playing by this time next year. Yep. I don't know if we had an accountability section at the beginning of this stream, so I'll just quickly say, besides shopping, I've mostly not been doing anything, watching a lot of Netflix. The Big Mouth show, I'm trying to watch that, and I don't know if I'm really going to succeed at watching that in the long run, because it seems like it's the same jokes or joke concept in every episode of kids going through puberty, and I don't know if that's enough meat on the bone as far as a comedic concept. I watched the first episode of the show Wednesday from Wednesday Addams, the Addams Family Values. I guess you'd call this, it is a spin-off from previous Addams Family content, or a reboot. Definitely seems like it's mostly focusing only on Wednesday Addams and getting rid of all of the other Addams Family characters except for Thing, which there is some shocking progression there, that Wednesday Addams is like the only character in that entire group of people that is still popular, and is amazingly way more popular than any of the other characters. Pugsley you wouldn't even think about, or Lurch, or like you'd think Morticia and Gomez might have some popularity still. And I can't help if it isn't solely due to the fact that Wednesday Addams cosplayers have taken the goth girl chick and to a whole different level with Wednesday Addams cosplaying, because there is at least one cosplayer that almost exclusively seems to do Wednesday Addams and seems to make a ton of cosplay lewd boudoir type images around Wednesday Addams, or an adult Wednesday Addams. Inherently though, watching the first episode of Wednesday on Netflix, it's a great way for them to do Harry Potter without doing Harry Potter, because they've sent Wednesday Addams to this special school full of vampires, sirens, and werewolves, and so now you've got Harry Potter, in which she's in this magical school where there is magic, and that puts her in a very different situation than how she would have been interacting with people in Addams Family Values, which people don't remember that show, so like they just remember having seen it. Or having seen some pictures from it. Plus, I imagine people confuse the Munsters and Addams Family Values quite a bit in their minds. Did I watch anything else on Netflix? Stand-up comedy routine, perhaps. I couldn't name the lady, but she was one of the few stand-up female comedians that was actually funny and able to tell a whole story or do a whole act to make a special. In fact, she's a big fat lesbian lady with curly hair, if you see it advertised to you on Netflix, and I think her act was pretty good. because it was one of those acts that comedians sometimes do, where she's just telling her whole life story in a very comedic way. She's not really trying to write jokes. It didn't feel like she was telling lies to tell jokes, although most comedians do. She wasn't trying to do a bunch of callbacks or just do any kind of like physical activity or anything like that. But it was a whole journey throughout the entire journey, and it looked like there weren't that many. I didn't see any cuts in it, so it looked like she actually stood on stage for like 40-50 minutes without drinking any water or walking off stage and taking a slight break, which a lot of comedians don't even get that far, let alone a lot of comedians don't even have 40 minutes of material. There's definitely a lot of stand-up acts I've seen on Netflix, particularly recently, where it's real questionable why they even tried to have a special in the first place, because they just don't have the content. I would kind of prefer if half of them just had a gimmick and they just pulled out the prop box and did prop comedy, or took their shirt off like that one guy that has way too many specials. At least he can fall back on that gimmick and just it'd be something that the audience expects every time, even if it is just doing the same joke again. Speaking of prop comics, Gallagher died recently in the past week or two, which he was probably pretty old. Was there anything else I watched on Netflix? Probably Daniel Spellbound cartoon, like that ends on a cliffhanger, so which is funny because they had perfectly wrapped it up, and then they decided to tease another season. When they could have just left it as it was. Unless I can destroy this card. I feel like I watched another cartoon. It feels really dumb when I'm watching, like, in a lot of ways I'm getting back to things I would have done as an edgelord teenager or so. Just watching anime for 16, 17-year-olds, watching cartoon shows that are often for even younger people. Let's see. Can I not tribute these two guys for anything? This anti-magic festival is really ruining the experience of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I have to say. It's just not what you want. Like, not being able to play spells. Alright, well, if I can't remember anything else, let's just start going through the news. Here's some Black Friday from Video Games Chronicles, so these are more UK sales discounts than anything else. The game Lil Gator will be released in December from Playtonic Friends. No R in the name. You may just have to win this way. Microsoft says it offered Sony a 10-year deal to keep Call of Duty on the PlayStation. I think we already talked about that. There honestly probably won't be that much news today since I am starting earlier on a Friday and since it is Black Friday and Thanksgiving and all of that. Warzone's Invisibility Glitch returning. This is all old news. Ubisoft confirming games are returning to Steam. Noticeably, I didn't look to see if Ubisoft games in particular would be on Steam for the sale, but I doubt they'd be on sale anyways. Let's see. Is that gonna let me do anything? Let's see what this does. Can we finally destroy the card? Yes, we can. Can we special summon something slightly better? Yes, we can. I still don't really understand this pendulum summoning because it does seem to me like I should be able to pendulum summon this 3-star thing, but maybe I can't because no, I don't really see a reason why I shouldn't be able to resummon it. And yet I can't. See, I think I'll win here, but it'll just take forever. We already talked about the Sony and Honda could potentially include a PS5. Sorry, I set an alarm clock for 11:30. I'm actually trying to change my Insomniac status and somewhat and have alarm clocks. They've never worked before in my life, but I figured I'd give it a go. Still think it's a little ridiculous for the idea of including PS5s in the cars. Although, if anything, that may highlight how both cars are becoming desperate to sell themselves, and PlayStation 5s have become, and video game consoles in general have just become the luxury item that people want. A car guy would almost certainly laugh in your face if you suggested that the thing that might convince an average citizen to buying a car would be video game consoles 10, 15 years ago. Go ahead and summon this and just activate this. I keep running into 0-0s, and that's all I ever really pay attention to. I don't pay attention to what the effects are on these 0-0s. Yeah, if at the end of the battle phase of this card battled, half your opponent's LP once return during your standby phase, shuffle this card into your deck. So, fighting this guy is not worth it. and there I lost. Where are we really as far as progress for today? Like, we're just slowly inching ourselves up towards getting this reward, and we really don't have enough progress since this ends in 3 days to really think we'll make it all the way up to this way. Certainly could try and play a different deck and keep it interesting. And they have integrated their website now, so yeah, people could be sharing decks now, whereas before sharing decks was not really the easiest of things to do. I don't think I've actually logged into this and done the whole stuff yet to make it easier. And honestly, getting a recipe for sharing a deck still doesn't really help that much unless I have the cards, and that's the main problem. Yep, this is still old news. Old news. Bloodstained was the game that is the most recent Castlevania game, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, and that's come out, and I'm fairly certain that Bloodstained 2 will probably come out fairly frequently in the next year or so. So the idea of God of War Ragnarok's director saying he wants to work on Castlevania next does create this weird situation where it would be somebody new making Castlevania games instead of the guy who was previously making Castlevania games, making Bloodstained games and competing. That, or they make a Castlevania game like Lords of Shadows that's totally a 3D game and not actually a Metroidvania style game in the first place. Guess this is a dinosaur card, and guess we can tribute that later, but we'll P-scale it now and in the turn. Yeah, this is all old news, so my macro must have not saved where it was at all. Because yeah, this is all. Oh, I suppose it's worth mentioning as I'm closing all these news articles, since they're just old news anyways, that there are a lot of third-party Xbox, Switch, and well, a few Switch third-party controllers and PlayStation controllers on sale. Like, you can get some discount there if you're willing to buy a third-party controller, which I can't really recommend for much of anybody. And the 8-bit though controllers that I might generally recommend, I don't know if there's even a single 8-bit though that has the Bluetooth like DualSense PlayStation connection feature. So without that, if you're going to use it on maybe an Apple TV, I don't know if it would work, or if you're going to try to use it on a PlayStation 5, you may have to have a separate dongle. The dongle from 8-bit though is honestly the best thing to buy first and foremost, is because that will let you connect official controllers like the Xbox controller to a Nintendo Switch and other things like that by just being a USB dongle. But I don't think I saw that on sale. But yeah, outside of 8-bit though, I can't recommend any other third-party controller. I did see someone on Someone shared on Facebook, I guess is where I saw it, my personal Facebook, a controller adapter that would turn the Nintendo Switch into more of a GameCube type controller, moving the buttons a little bit further to the sides. And that's not a terrible idea, frankly. Like, the tiny little Joy-Cons just don't work for my hands, but at this point I'm already using the Xbox controller adapter, so I've already solved that problem. And I don't think it solves much of an issue otherwise. And almost certainly that adapter doesn't have the tilt shift features or that the Joy-Cons have. You know, actually, it's pretty dumb that the Joy-Cons have so much technology built into them when a singular tilt shift feature built into the screen would probably do just as well for most games. Sure, that stops you from taking one Joy-Con and handing it to another player, and having two players from two Joy-Cons with tilt shift features, but like, I don't know if you really need that. You could just tell people that the people who want to play with tilt shift have to hold the screen and tilt the screen, and the other two players would have to use a different controlling configuration. Moving on, I think this was old news, so I'm going to burn through this. And this is old news. This Target deal, still the best deal I've seen. But it does inherently cause you to get the Series S, which means you can't put discs in it, so you can't buy used games, which that'll cost you more in the long run. In the long run, building a PC, even if it would cost you like $700 to $1,400 to build a PC, you will save over the lifetime a lot more on Steam games being on sale, and in that way. Although inherently, there is also this point where you can't really justify giving a laptop to kids because they'll get it stolen or drop it, and you really shouldn't, or at least most people can't justify just giving a PC directly to a kid when they're particularly younger. You instead need to basically have a family gaming PC and time shift it out and let one kid play with it for a certain time, then let the parents play with it for some time. And that's certainly the way things were when I was a kid, is that there was a family PC, and maybe I monopolized the use of it 90% of the time, but it was not. It was in a family room and it was usable by everyone. At least the first PCs that my family had were. First couple of them, we had quite a few. Probably too many, really. But yeah. I probably had at least 4 or 5, maybe not full generations of PCs, but at least 4 or 5 PCs in the family room before I was old enough to have a PC in my bedroom. And yeah, that probably was the way to do it, and that almost certainly was a lot of wasted money on different PCs. just trying to play here without actually learning what these cards do. I did see like one Slick Deals sale. Amazon Prime does have some discounts on PCs. I did see like one desktop type tower computer that looked like it was a decent deal. There are a lot of laptops, but they're not like gaming laptops, and you start to run into some obvious factors that are problems if you know what to look for, but if you don't know what to look for, it's just a confusing minefield as far as buying laptops in particular, because a lot of them have integrated graphics. A lot of them are designed to just be these battery saving devices that really don't have enough power to do anything. Ideally, I would say you probably need 4 cores, 8 threads of an Intel i5 or an AMD Ryzen 6. Minimum, you need non-integrated graphics in the sense that you need either a AMD, either an NVIDIA mobile graphics card, which isn't going to be anywhere as good as a regular NVIDIA graphics card, or a AMD Ryzen integrated graphics card, which that is an integrated graphics card. So I just said don't get integrated graphics, but for the AMD Ryzen ones, that's kind of your only choice. But if you're getting Intel graphics as your graphics card, you definitely avoid that for gaming. Really, you still, I think, need NVIDIA graphics cards if you're going to get a laptop. And then I think you need at least 16 gigabytes of RAM. I think you're going to suffer from that. I think you need at least 512 gigabytes of hard drive space. Some of the features that probably still are showing up on laptops, like DVD drives or Blu-ray drives, may not be really that necessary these days. The keyboard and mouse being an integrated part of a laptop become a factor. Instead of potentially you could get very cheap keyboards and mouse for like $10 used, refurbished from Amazon, for a computer, but it being built into a laptop, that's what you're going to use. And so if it is a full-size keyboard versus a non-full-size keyboard, that's going to make a difference. And if it has a touchpad that's really good, that's good. But if it has a tiny little nub that's really awful, that's going to make a difference. Your screen is also going to be integrated, your speakers are going to be integrated, and your camera is going to be integrated if any of that matters to you. The screen almost certainly does. You probably don't need a touch screen on a laptop. And inherently there is going to be an urge from Apple fanboys to just buy an Apple MacBook. Of course, even at that, you run into the problem of the only MacBooks I've seen on sale being the M1 processor, whereas obviously whether the M2 is better or not for your situation, that's where Apple is going to push all of its software development and improvement. So buying an M1 MacBook is buying an obsolete product from a company that is notorious for making products even more obsolete. It's very possible that the next generation of nerds, as it were, or the next generation of kids, are not even going to have somebody who is a nerd who can build a computer. Like, it may come down to, like, when I was a kid, if you needed a TV repaired or were into ham radio or electronics or anything like that, the kind of Radio Shack type stuff that people would go to Radio Shack for, you were looking at a previous generation of people, very often people who had been trained to understand that technology from being drafted in the military or in otherwise were in the military. I wouldn't be surprised if a new generation of kids have to go to their parents and say, can you build a computer for me, because I don't know how to do this and I am too ADHD to learn it. A lot of these seem to have special summon abilities and then not have the special summon abilities. Continuing with the news, just trying to burn through this. Yeah, UK regulators may are investigating Apple and Google's duopoly on the mobile ecosystem. This is old news too. DualSense controller discounted. Yeah, old news. I believe the Callisto Protocol director came out and defended some level of complaints and pushback around the idea of the season pass having extra new player death animations. I guess inherently what they're complaining about is that it feels like this is cut content that would have been in the main game being sold as part of the season pass, which, yeah, inherently that's always the case anyways. The season pass always seems like it's cut content. There might be a better way in which he could have sold it, or they could have phrased it. They could have said that the season pass will include canon breaking death animations, and if they just used the phrase canon breaking, less people would be upset around that. If they said the true story and the true way you should experience death animations are without the season pass, but if you get the season pass, you'll get comedic or silly death animations where they overreact or where their faces are getting melt off in a Mortal Kombat style, something that wouldn't feel realistic and true to the nature of what the Callisto Protocol is trying to do. Otherwise, in the same way, that would be in the same vein of a lot of Japanese games having like your default realistic costumes for characters, and then there being some DLC element that adds skimpy clothing or silly clothing to the characters. Or those, of course, would have been costumes, certainly, that would have been unlockables in games of a previous generation. Resident Evil 4 I recently played, and you get yeah, like by beating the main game and beating separate ways, you unlock two special costumes for Resident Evil 4 for free, no season pass needed. I can't complain though about people pushing back against season pass as an idea, because the Callisto Protocol in particular does not feel like a game that needed to have a season pass in the first place. And I'm just going to close some of these articles without even showing them, because I am not making any progress here. Also, this probably needs to be probably needs a just be done with the Yu-Gi-Oh! At this point, we've gone an hour and a half. I got somebody to subscribe to my channel, and when you're celebrating 1 subscription, that just shows how slow it can be on YouTube for a small time, a small potatoes YouTuber like me. And then somebody else decided to go on quite the comment thread. I mean, it's not really a thread, just one comment that was super long about me covering Shadowhand, and I'm like, okay, I'm glad you enjoyed Shadowhand. He didn't say anything offensive or that I disagree with at all. He just basically put his own review as a comment, which I guess that's fair enough. That probably works very nicely for YouTube. There are people who aren't going to bother to make video footage, who would just like to do a written comment / review themselves, and putting those up on your own website or some other site is going to be difficult. You might be able to put up a review like that on Steam or maybe Metacritic. But I'm more than happy to have somebody comment on my videos at all. So yeah, I gave it a like and a thumbs up. And I actually did read most of it. I skimmed it. Of course, if I was actually a big YouTuber, I probably wouldn't have a lot of time to be reading the long comments. And most people don't comment more than a sentence or so. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet was Nintendo's biggest launch ever, with 10 million sales. I also heard the numbers that it accounted for 96% of all sales the week it came out in Japan. And that is very amazing, but very crappy too, in that Scarlet and Violet just are not... It's not a good game. It's not programmed well. It's glitchy. It's buggy. It's got problems. There's inherently, I don't think, no interesting gym leaders or interesting characters much at all. Arguably, I'm not that deep into the Pokemon, but I don't know if I'm particularly that interested in the Pokemon either. This is concept art in a 2D colorful style that's not even the way the game actually looks. So you can see Video Games Chronicles preferring to use a concept picture as its thumbnail over actual screenshots. Apparently the FTC is likely to file an antitrust lawsuit. Here's the article. Finally, we may be getting to new news. The Callisto Protocol's death animations, quote, aren't being held back from the main game, creator says. Glenfield Schofield claims they'll be created after the game is released due to fan demand. So he's actively making the argument, which is hard to believe, that the fans are going to demand specific death animations or just demand more death animations in general. I know death animations were a big factor in Dead Space, and this is the spiritual successor to Dead Space, but I don't think I could name a specific death animation that I wanted to see or have added to the Callisto Protocol. It definitely feels like the Callisto Protocol needs a better PR team. I hope they actually have one. I would think they would have one. But I think the creator probably should be coordinating with the PR team or not saying anything at all. Particularly as soon as you see that first pushback. Inherently, that's when you've got to stop and take a breath and say, I need help. And hire your PR team. Because the off the cuff responses by the creators, or by somebody involved in the development of the game is where trouble starts. And honestly, had they done some market research, they probably would have known not to announce this without having a strategy if there was pushback against it in the first place. What kind of DLC? It's an interesting question, I suppose, is what kind of DLC would I have wanted to see in Dead Space 1? There was, I think, a lot of suits and armor upgrades and kind of pay to win DLC in Dead Space 1 if you got the season pass. And I don't think people like that either. What I probably would have wanted if there was going to be a season pass around Dead Space 1 and DLC content, because at that time DLC content and such were not guaranteed. What I probably would have wanted is a almost like Separate Ways in Resident Evil 4 scenario where you played as somebody other than Isaac who was there potentially at the beginning of the necromorphs appearing, or was actually not even fighting necromorphs at all, but going through the same level design and level layout with just slight tweaks would have been fine. Or you could have had even DLC that showed somebody going back to the Ishimura, which was the name of the spaceship, after Isaac had been there, and doing maybe cleanup work. Maybe that's as simple as just a different skin on Isaac, so it looks like a different character and tells maybe slightly different cutscenes and stories. You would want something that would have you play the game a second time or a third time. Really just a new game plus, but you already had that. There was a lot of spin-off, like Dead Space content that didn't really work. I'm gonna play regular ranked here and see if I can get up to platinum before the end of the month. But yeah, I can't think of dying animations that I would want. I can't think of things like that I would really want. I'm very much story, narrative, and visuals. If you added more audio, I really wouldn't be that interested in it. Arguably season passes, maybe just turning into places where you get digital art books and soundtracks is really what all games should do. A lot of games do very much focus on having DLC that is only the soundtrack and the art book, knowing that a decent number of people are not interested in that. But yeah, I don't know if you're gonna add more content, why not just call it Dead Space 2? Why not just work on the next game? Dead Space 2 probably could have used some improvement. So I don't know why they bothered to make DLC. I know the argument definitely is that the DLC content keeps people working and employed. but I don't know if I really believe the argument enough. I kind of feel like you could just be working on your next project or working on games pitches for your next project. As soon as you are done with a game, as soon as the game is locked down and gone gold, you just should probably be working on pitches for a sequel, pitches for the next game, bug fixing, if that's what you're doing. Inherently, the way you would develop a video game would be completely different if people were just paid monthly on annual salaries and annual yearly contracts, instead of often feeling like they are going to be fired at any point. If it was just set in stone that everybody either had universal basic income and then could just work on video games as their hobby and as their art form, or if they were just tight union contracts where people don't get laid off just on a whim, then you don't need the argument of, oh well, we've got to make some money somehow in between the next project and the previous project. This guy is a big guy. Let's see, moving on. Apparently, I said they were getting refunds, but it seems like it is mixed results as far as requesting refunds. And notably, Game Freak and Nintendo have not made any promise. Yeah, they're just not making any program progress. Really, as far as... Well, they're not making any promises as far as releasing a patch or anything. Where that seems to be a mistake. That they should at least make a promise that say there will be at least one patch released by before December 25th, before Christmas. We hope to address as many issues as possible. Let's see. Here's a new article. It's claimed that GPU shipments last quarter saw the biggest drop since the 2009 recession. Year-over-year shipments were reportedly down 25%. Shipments are not sales, so that's more of an indication that GPU manufacturers were not making as many graphics cards, perhaps because they knew they wouldn't sell, than it is a indictment that people were not buying GPUs, but new GPUs. But I would lean towards believing that people are not buying new GPUs. Also, the size and price of high-end GPUs, NVIDIA graphics cards in particular, are astronomically too large. And then there is also a continuing issue of the power connectors for the 4090 series graphics cards being way inferior and dangerous, and potentially short-circuiting and melting the connectors. Yep. It definitely shows that they need a new control connector. I think I've pretty much lucked out, though. I can't imagine I would need to buy a graphics card as long as mine doesn't break and nothing else breaks in my computer. I don't think I'll need to buy a new computer for a while, which is good. I'd like it to last a good 10 years plus. There is There is a slight danger, I guess, for me in that eventually I may see a sale that convinces me to get either like an ultra wide screen that is 2 monitors and one as like a curved monitor. My eyesight's not getting better, certainly. It never does as you age, so having a monitor closer to me might be interesting, or a monitor bigger that's just widescreen and bigger might be interesting. I have 3 monitors, but it would be nice to have one curved monitor that was actually 3 separate monitors with no seams or bezel on the edges. But if I was going to get something, I would be looking for the perfect combination there of something with a very low response time and something with a high refresh rate, and very possibly just having low response and high refresh rate, which is basically the same thing, would probably get to a bigger resolution. So if I got a new monitor, it probably would push me somewhat towards trying to play games at higher resolutions. Although, not necessarily. It still is a lot of hard drive space and a lot of upload time to upload anything at 2K or 4K. And visually, I probably can't tell the difference. The current monitor I'm using is breaking at some level, but it kind of seems like it's an intermittent problems. I see little white lines pop up every now and then, but it doesn't seem like it's big enough of a problem to really address, and it doesn't seem like it's a permanent problem. So having a monitor that was gifted to me, so it was actually used already, that occasionally has a little bit of an issue, is something I can live with. Plus it's my 3rd monitor, so I'm only looking at it to look at chat or just make sure I'm still recording, watch my timer, tell me how long I've been streaming. Yep, here's that story I was talking about. 96% of Japan's top 10 physical game sales, I guess there's some caveats here, this week were Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So basically what they did is they took this number and then they divided it by all of these numbers added up to get 96%, whatever. Now noticeably in the top 10 list here, you've got Splatoon, which wasn't new that week, and then God of War Ragnarok, which I think was new that week, and then you don't really have anything else really selling. And noticeably, that is very much in line with what you would experience on the release of a Dragon Quest game. So very possibly Pokemon is the new Dragon Quest, and it's very possibly that the Japanese people knew that there was going to be long lines and great enthusiasm for Pokemon, so this was just not the week to buy other physical discs. See, the next free Epic Game Store titles have been confirmed. Fort Triumph, an RPG in a box, will replace Star Wars Squadrons, which, boy, is that going to from something fairly big to something incredibly small. Splinter Cell is being turned into a BBC radio drama. Radio 4 will begin airing episodes of the Spy series starting next week. Now I wonder if this has anything really to do with Ubisoft at all, or if this isn't just a case that the radio drama rights, which would be potentially different rights in the UK compared to video game rights or novel rights or any other kinds of rights that might exist for the Tom Clancy properties. Well, that wasn't a victory. Well, if I'm gonna win, I'm gonna probably have to pay attention a lot more, so that'll be the last of this game. I probably would have to win a couple times. If anything, that may have helped with some of the daily quests, though, as far as activating spell cards in the middle of the anti-spell festival. Made a lifetime effect. And we still don't really have anything going on here. They really are failing outside of these bonus cards, which I barely pay attention to. They're really failing to give me any reason why I would want to come back to the storefront every time I stream or every time I'm playing the game. Did get a super rare. Guess the question here is, how are we doing as far as cards? Still really haven't tried to spend a bunch of the normal and rare crafting points. Dismantle all extra cards. That gives me pathetic 10 rare crafting points. And I guess that tells me basically everything I need to know. We could drag this down to the point where we start to see the cards we don't have. Right. So yeah, as far as owning at least one copy of all the cards in the game, we are at the 2/3 mark, where we own 2/3 of all the cards in the game, at least one copy. Once we start to get it down to like almost all the cards, then all of a sudden I can start to build decks and actually start to make decisions as far as which cards actually need to be crafted and which cards don't. Let's see. I just really question whether this was Ubisoft's doing, because none of this quite feels like Ubisoft is involved at all. It just, you see BBC, Tom Clancy, Splinter Cell Firewall, Radio 4. Yeah. I'm fairly certain Splinter Cell is based off a Tom Clancy book. I think Tom Clancy is dead and somebody is now selling the estate. Arguably, I would make the economic argument that when somebody's dead like Tom Clancy, his content should probably go immediately into the public domain. I don't think it benefits society more to have even inheritance happen at all of artistic creations, ideas, concepts, copyrights, things like that. Like, although in all fairness, if inheritance didn't happen at all in general, and everybody's money once they died went into, say, Social Security or something like that, Medicare, healthcare for all types of services, that would also benefit society way more And people definitely wouldn't agree to that. Maybe they should, though. Moving on, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 is on sale for Black Friday. They really got to have an article every couple days about Modern Warfare 2. Video Games Chronicle does. FIFA 23 is on sale for Black Friday. They're also talking about FIFA quite a bit as a clickbait. Activision Blizzard, quote, won't hesitate to fight to defend Microsoft's acquisition. The CCO Lulu Cheng Miservi says it's absurd to suggest the deal is anti-competitive. Which, yeah, they definitely seem like they want to be acquired. I have not seen any evidence that anybody inside of Activision Blizzard doesn't want to be acquired. This is probably one of the most friendly acquisitions we'll see in this decade. The Nintendo Switch OLED price is down to £279 in the UK for Black Friday, or £299 if you include Switch Sports. Apparently, they want you to support Video Games Chronicles by completing their community survey, which that's not really news. The Xbox Series X is on sale for Black Friday. US players can get $150 off the total cost of a Xbox All Access subscription. Let's see. In the US, the only current major Xbox Series X deal is at Verizon, the cell phone company, which is offering an 18% discount on Xbox All Access subscriptions there. It seems weird that you'd even get an Xbox All Access subscription from Verizon. I guess Verizon also serves the internet, so maybe that's their thinking. But yeah, as far as the actual hardware being on sale, I'm just not seeing that. And you gotta admit, if we're gonna talk about no competition, there literally is no competition, and really can't be that much competition between selling the hardware of consoles, because there's only one manufacturer of consoles. What needed to have happened, and it probably should have happened decades ago, generations ago, is the idea of clone hardware being a lot more capable of being built and a lot more legal. In the old days, Nintendo fought very hard, and we gotta blame Nintendo on this, against the idea of clone cartridges that didn't have the seal of approval, that were designed specifically to be played in the NES. I'm not sure if anybody ever got far enough to have a clone NES console itself, but that's really what should be happening here, is that there should be either a force to say all the consoles really should be PCs now, and that they don't need to be these custom lockdown gaming consoles. But even then, even when the NES was around, perhaps it should have been a case where people could have made clone NESs and sold them. But when you have only one manufacturer making hardware, you have a monopoly at the top. They're going to inherently set the price at which they sell their devices to the retail people, and then the retail people are going to be held to a bunch of rules about what they can sell the devices for otherwise, and that's going to effectively lock the price down. And yeah, nobody is really that desperate. Companies talk about recessions and hard times all the time, and basically just go, woe is me, but none of them get desperate enough to actually discount anything. I've been in like what are supposed to be liquidation bankruptcy clearances, which often companies claim they're in bankruptcy or have everything must go type sales, and it's not really the case. And even then, things are not really discounted and not really being sold because it's just so easy, even if your company went completely out of business, to sell your products to another company who will then sell those products at the same price. Moving on with the news, you can get 36% off PlayStation Plus subscriptions with the Amazon UK Black Friday deal. And then our last article from Video Games Chronicles is the Epic Games Store will reportedly offer a free game every day over Christmas, which that would be kind of an interesting inversion of what they're offering next week, which is 2 pretty bad games, pretty mediocre looking games. So maybe they will offer a free game every day at the Epic Games Store, and none of them will be worth mentioning because they'll be really small, very mediocre games. Although I'm not sure if the Epic Games Store even has that much of an inventory of mediocre small games to give away. But yeah, at least doing something is nice. And here's another great example of competition not really working, because the Epic Games Store has been trying to gain ground and compete with Steam for at least 2 years, I would say now, giving away a game every month. Valve has not given away a single game in that time. They aren't feeling the pressure. They don't feel the need to compete. Individual sellers of games definitely have put games on the storefront for free for a limited time, but Valve has not front paged offered a free game in my entire memory of it. They probably have briefly. It would make a lot of sense around Thanksgiving to say, let's give away Portal 1 because of Portal with RTX being out, or let's give away Call of Duty Counter-Strike Go is what I meant to say. Yeah, CSGO. But I think that game's free anyways. But yeah, I guess we'll have to just see. In 2019 they gave away 12 games, in 2020 and 2021 they gave away 15 titles. If they're going to give away a game every day, that would be over double. And then we're to the Gematsu articles, and we'll try to burn through these fairly quickly if they're going to be redundant. Bit Summit Let's Go has been set for July 14th through the 16th of 2023. This is, I think, kind of a game jam. No, it's not a game jam. It's more of a presentation festival, like an E3 equivalent in Japan. Nowhere as big. Samurai Showdown rollback netcode open beta test for Steam begins January 2023. It's always weird when a game adds rollback net code after the game has already been released. King of Fighters 15 Season 2 begins in January of 2023 with DLC character Shingo Yabuki, which I have no idea who that character is, but I'm sure King of Fighters fans may know him. Samurai Maiden has another trailer if you want to check that out at Gematsu. Disgaea 7 details its ranked battles and more classes. Samurai Maiden in particular, I think, is dangerously getting close to being oversaturating my attention as far as that game. I think it's going to have too many trailers, too many announcements, and when it gets released, it will probably just be forgotten regardless. A 2001 released hack and slash action adventure game called Blade of Darkness is now available for the Switch, which, yeah, more and more I think we will start to see old games showing up on the Switch, because that's about all they can handle. This definitely does not feel like a game that should have been released on the Switch, or a game that should have been re-released at all. It's not something that I recognize, but it feels like it was ever actually popular or relevant. R-Type Tactics 1 and 2 Cosmos adds an Xbox Series version. Witch Spring R has been delayed to 2023 and released its 4th trailer. This is a turn-based RPG game that I'm not sure I've seen before. And this honestly doesn't feel like I've seen it before. That was one thing, certainly. I found one game that was not on my wish list that definitely should have been on my wish list while shopping. But I didn't really have a way to find any more than that one game. So there is this possibility, certainly, that I have missed a lot of games in the past years as far as things that should be on the wish list, things I should buy and play, but also there's a possibility I've only missed a few games. They have the updated Famitsu sales as far as the numbers going here, if you want to check that out. The general thing to look at or know is that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's selling very well. Although them releasing 2 different versions potentially doubles their sales or approaches doubling their sales. The Switch OLED model selling hardware 100,000 units, and Switch Lite and Switch Regular selling 60,000 models combined, which puts the PlayStation 5 that week into 4th position, with the PS4 being in 5th position, and then the PS5 Digital Edition being in 6th edition. But I would say the Xbox Series X not doing terrible either. 1,000 units, that's way better than 150 units, and way better than 34 units for the new 2DS LL. Let's see. Atelier Ryza 3, Alchemist of the End, and the Secret Key has its 2nd trailer and then 18 minutes of Switch gameplay. There is arguably a problem with the Atelier Ryza series in that the characters aged too fast. Like, each, I think, adventure of Atelier Ryza is supposed to be a group of friends having a summer adventure together, but it does just kind of feel like they could have stretched it out for 6 games or 9 games instead of only 3 games. But who knows, maybe they'll bring back some characters, bring back the main character in future Atelier series releases. I could see an idea of making a Japanese RPG where there's a new group of friends every 2 or 3 games, and then older friends can basically retire and still be in the world, but they're not characters that you're playing as. You could write a world narrative where that would kind of make sense too. You could do the same with Pokemon, and like Ash Ketchum too. Ash Ketchum could have been part of the main character of the cartoon for 5 seasons, and then at that point he could have said, I'm too old, I've decided to stop adventuring and instead just be a gym leader, and then you could introduce a new narrative of a new story, a new character, and then Ash Ketchum could show up in every new season as a leader of a gym. Moving on, Nier Automata version 1.1a TV anime promotion file 005 Adam and Eve trailer is available, which definitely is another art style that I would call this 2D colorful. or just straight up call it anime because that's what it is, as a way of describing it. I don't know if it's really worth the 25 seconds to look at this, but yeah, it seems like this anime could be very nicely animated. I'm not sure if the characters Adam and Eve have been referred to or talked about much in the Nier Automata series. That's another game that I don't think I actually own Nier Automata, nor do I think I have the re-release of the first Nier game, and maybe you really don't need to play the first Nier game to play Nier Automata anyways. I think most people didn't. A game called Buccaneer, it launches April 20th in Japan. What kind of game is it? A tower defense game? A naval tower offensive game instead of a defense game. Well, that's different somewhat. Winning Post 10 has been announced for the PS4, PS5, and Switch and PC. This is the horse simulation racing game. I'm not sure if PC means Steam. Yes, it does mean Steam. So this might be the first time that we've had a Winning Post game potentially come to the West. Whereas I think most of these games are really only somewhat popular in Japan, and well, I think maybe not even that popular in Japan. They're definitely trying to attract gamblers, horse racing gamblers around the world with that kind of game. But I wouldn't really be upset about buying that game and playing it, or spotlighting it, giving it a quick look. I don't use the phrase spotlight anymore. I'm trying to train myself away from that and just using quick look. A game called Spirit Hunter Death Mark II has an overview trailer. It's a horror adventure game due out December 1st in Japan. Got a creepy porcelain doll character here, and then you'd have to go to YouTube to watch the video, so I'll leave it at that. It's for the PC, PS4, and Switch. I hope something like this comes to the West, but you could probably investigate fairly easily to see if the first game is on Steam. Otherwise, well, if it's not on Steam, the sequel is not going to really matter. Let's see, Nier Automata shipments and digital sales have topped 7 million. Nier Replicant, which is, I think, the remake of the first game, Nier Replicant version 1 point and a bunch of numbers, have topped 1.5 million. So ideally you would want to play this Nier Replicant version 1 and a bunch of numbers, then play Nier Automata. But I didn't even think about putting those in the wish list or in the shopping cart, so I should have thought about that. Utawaro Mono, Reiru Mono, spin-off visual novel Gozoku Tantai no Suri has been announced for the PS4 and Switch. Which, yep, it's a visual novel, so I don't know if we really have a lot to say here. Seems like the characters are interesting little characters, but it's just going to be a visual novel. Maybe a somewhat relevant and popular visual novel, since Utawaro Mono, I think, is somewhat popular. Genshin Impact version 3.3 update, all senses clear, all existence void, launches December 7th. At this point, I kind of feel like Genshin Impact is settled into a pace with giving new content. There's a whole card game in Genshin Impact now, I guess. Interesting. Yeah. Despite the small shock by there being potentially card games and gambling in it, I don't think there's much more Genshin Impact can do to get new eyes on it. It's just a known quantity. I doubt I would bother to actually play it. Here we've got a racing game that looks like it might be good as we go through games that came out on Steam, which arguably there's more games here than I thought would come out. I would think you wouldn't bother to try and release things during the autumn sale, but the autumn sale is going long enough that you still definitely could release things. Plus, I'm not sure if these people have really control over when their games actually get released, or if it isn't particularly just forced upon them by some Valve employee. This is a nothing jigsaw puzzle game, followed by another nothing jigsaw puzzle game. Is this the same developer and publisher? We'll keep an eye out for that. That game Vertigo came out to no reviews, really. The Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. I'll give this a chance, but I don't think this needs a YouTube short. Which, if anything, that highlights how weird it can be for some games. It feels like Vertigo should have been something. This game Hospice, I don't even know what you would call this art style. You have to probably call it 2D colorful with a what is this? Dithering? Is that what this is called? Or diffusion? I can't remember the word. It used to be a thing that they would do in printing, either printing for your home printer or printing for comic books or things like that. Or it's a very odd art style, and there's really no reason why this art style would ever show up in a video game. And some of these images I think stand out interestingly with that art style, and some of these images perhaps are just being regular images with a photo filter on top of it. I'm going to give this a follow, but it's a volume 1, and perhaps I should start curating to not make shorts around volume 1s. It did look like today, after a pretty good run of YouTube shorts for games that came out, that my YouTube shorts today so far have not gotten a lot of views. But I'm probably checking a little too early and expecting a little too much, particularly after on Black Friday. So this would definitely be a day to throw the statistics out the window and just call it a wash. That's what Good Mythical Morning basically did. They put out videos going, we know you're not watching, so we're not going to even try. Which, yeah, I could see there being significantly fewer people watching YouTube at the moment, but show must go on as far as the live streams, and it makes a lot of sense to still live stream. I guess I'm gonna give this a chance, but visually, I'm really struggling with the idea of which games I should make YouTube shorts around and which ones I shouldn't. And see, after this stream, that'll be back to a point where I need to make more YouTube shorts. Anyways, just to get rid of the tabs. Unless I can do something else with it. Which I don't think I can do anything else with it. I wish I could automate the process more. What I need to do would be to use some kind of macro type software that could interact with all kinds of software instead of using Selenium/UI Vision, which only can integrate with the web browsers themselves. But even at that, it would still be very difficult to get OBS to work. What I should potentially investigate, as far as somebody's already done that solution, is if there is perhaps a plugin in OBS that would script something, that I could add more scripting that way. But what I'm trying to do here is very unique. So we do have an adult game today called Alien. It's 3D natural, and it's apparently a female gray. I would describe it in the shape of a gray, but it seems more bluish in skin color. And honestly, if you said this was a sea monster and not an alien, I would believe that just as much. Yep. And it is once again one of these games with just straight up porn in the screenshots. $5.09, English and Chinese. Perhaps we'll start to see a bit of a trend where we see adult games that support English and Chinese, and that'll mean something. Here we have a Space Invaders clone. Really wasn't expecting an adult game to come out this Friday or over the weekend. And I'm still heavily kind of not expecting to see any more, which I very possibly will be confused by, or tricked by that assumption, or proven wrong by that assumption. Think we can say no to this Moto Pizza Courier. Oh, I don't think I could stand playing a game where you are literally running a theocracy. That sounds like a nightmare game. It would either cause me to have a lot to say that I think people might rebel against or be unhappy to hear, or it would cause me just to be incredibly sad, either for any number of reasons around that theme. I think we can say no to Delivery Man also. Let me double check to see if Pimp Island is the next of the next game. Pimp Island, P-I-M-P. This is an adults only game for $11.99. It's English and Chinese only. It doesn't seem to actually have any nudity in it, according to the mature content. It says it only has strong language and sexual language. And honestly, it looks like it is, frankly, one of the worst RPG Maker type clones. Very possibly not even being made in RPG Maker when I look at it, which they've just slapped some bikini laden girls around it. There is potentially a argument, by the way, it's what I would call to the, I can't really say natural, but if it weren't for two girls with blue hair and pink hair, it really would just be natural. But I guess inherently, even in the skin tones and the shininess of the skin, the anime style often is to show a level of shininess and smoothness uh, in the skin when you're doing a 2D colorful 2D anime style. So yeah, there is an idea, I think, around the idea of being a pimp. Probably not a great idea, but Postal is a game in comparison, so I could see doing that. It probably would be better if that was just missions in GTA or Saints Row. This game doesn't look like anything. Than being its own separate game. But yeah, I could see the idea potentially working. But the problem with being a pimp as in a game is that you'd just be doing pimp things, which is either stealing money from prostitutes, forcing women into the life of prostitution, getting them high and addicted to drugs, which I think happens often with pimps. Like there's not a lot of good things you could do there until you get really silly with it, and then you're potentially going to war with other pimps on the street. This next game is yet another adult game, so I guess we do have just a bundled list here of adult games. It's called Heartbreak Hotel. It's 2D. I would say it is leaning towards an older style of anime that it's trying to copy, and really it's closer to just a 2D natural animation style. There are some characters with different colored hair, and natural versus colorful is still a bad way to break things up. Generally, I would just say it doesn't look like there's a Asian animator in charge of these animations. They look pretty bad. They're claiming it's a JRPG in the tags. I don't think it really is, but I can't particularly really tell you what it is. It kind of feels like it might be a visual novel, but I'm not seeing any text. It's $2.39. It says it supports English, Spain, Spanish, simplified Chinese, Russian, and Japanese. I'm still really having a hard time trying to figure out what kind of game it is. I almost wonder. It does have some visual language, visual novel elements. And then maybe some photography mini games. Maybe even some point and click elements. I don't think so though. Yeah, I could not really tell you how you play this game. But it also doesn't look like it is just a collection of scenes or storyline like an average visual novel would be. It looks like there's a score system and potentially even a clock system. Seems very weird as a game to not really make itself obvious. Or you have garbage games like this that make it so fairly obvious that it's going to be a platforming game of some sort. Or you have slightly better games here that are immediately obvious. As one thing I heard about like setting up Steam pages, and something I can definitely agree with, is that you gotta get people in the first couple of seconds to understand immediately what their game is going to be like. And that's going to be very hard if you made a game that is actually very unique and innovative. You're going to have to find some kind of touchstone to keep people's attention long enough to say, here's why our game is different or unique and innovative. But it needs to look like an actual game to start with. I imagine this is a match 2 game. It looks pretty, but not really worth playing. Then we have another adult game called Inheritance Ladina's Path. And it straight up looks like it is a very high action hack and slash game that just happens to have the main character in kind of a bikini outfit. There seems to be a health bar, a mana bar, stamina bars. I wonder if I can really show this off. Well, interesting. Even though this is an adults only game, they've gone the route of not putting anything inappropriate or not family friendly in the screenshots. So you have this character, she's in a two-piece bikini and kind of showing a lot of skin but not that much skin, and there's just a lot of hack and slash stuff there. See, it starts off showing off this. You can see there's a bunch of stamina energy things, but then just look at how much you're dashing and attacking. Seems like you'd have to probably assume that this is a game that actually doesn't have that much content in it, and it was like half developed and then they decided to throw in the adult content to sell it. But I'm not sure if that's the case, really. This puts me in a weird position because I kind of want to put this on the follow list, and notably it has a nude mod expansion palette, so you may not even get the nudity until you buy the mod. Normally, if there's a nude mod in a game, those are free fan-made mods. So this has this weird early access aspect to it, but it also kind of feels like it's a game that really shouldn't be in the adults only section. It's a weird choice. Certainly, perhaps a choice that will hurt its sales. It says it's English full audio. It's free to play. I would be interested to see if this game does at some point come out of early access and is actually good. This is not in any way very different from what the original God of War games were, in that there was just a lot of violence and hack and slash things, and then you had a scantily clad guy. It's just, this is the girl equivalent of it, and we should have had a girl equivalent of a God of War game a long time ago. That being said, I'm not going to make a YouTube short around this, but I will put it on the follow list, which does then put a landmine in the follow list if he decides to add some nudity into the screenshots. Although inherently, if you're selling the DLC with nudity, then you can't make deceptive screenshots to imply that nudity would be in the base game, can you? Well, you shouldn't be allowed to. I will say this, today could have gone a lot worse. A lot of these games could have straight up not loaded any of the screenshots, and we could have been struggling or just failing miserably to actively be able to see the games and cover the games. Next we have another adult game. They're just all bundled together on Friday, called Dark Desire 6, which seems like it's a 3D natural CGI models of women. They seem to be doing like a fashion show type visual novel experience. A visual novel set in a fashion show. That's what I mean by that. It's $14.99. which is a lot of money. It says it has English. It says it has English for full audio. It also says this is the last game with at least 5 episodes. I will add a new episode in the final game as long as I can afford to finance it at a slow pace. 1 episode per month might be endless. So, the Dark Desire series, which I think are games that have been released fairly quickly. We could probably do some research here and see when did Dark Desire 1 get released. February 23rd, 2022. Before that, there was also Midnight Stories. So it's definitely just an asset flipper, but it's an asset flipper trying to make adult content in a field that doesn't really have adult content. At all, so there isn't really a lot of competition. Moving on, we have a game called Try to Fly, which seems to be a physics type game, just falling and hurting yourself. There was another game that was somewhat like this. I kind of want to say it was called Action Hank, but I don't know if it really was Action Hank. There might be something to that, as far as just a silly physics game. Next we have Female Prison, which I feel like we've seen this game before, if by a different name. 2 CGI Chinese women being shown. It's selling for $4.99 and it's English and Chinese only. I guess it's worth mentioning that there are some riots seemingly going on in China, or protests. Perhaps it's better to call them protests instead of riots. Doesn't seem like much of a game, this game, Female Prison. It doesn't seem to really want to imply there's nudity or anything in there. Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's any nudity in it at all. So it's just this weird role play. And if anything, it's probably a great example of where somebody making a porn on this theme works probably way better than flipping 3D natural models of CGI characters into a video game experience, because there's just not any real interaction here, and there's just not anything really happening here. Thought there was a game already called Under Observation on Steam, but I guess nothing really stops you from having 2 games by the same name. It doesn't look like anything of interest. And I guess at this point it would be stupid to make an assumption that that would be the last adult game. It really does just go very wildly different as far as how many adult games we're seeing, although it's a little bit more consistent than I thought. Like, I was really expecting it to be 100% of all adult games were released on Fridays, and only Fridays. And honestly, if they just came out and admitted that's what they were doing, I wouldn't be super upset by it. It would help with streaming, certainly, to say this is the After Dark episode in which we cover the adult games. I'm going to give this a follow, but I don't think it deserves a short. Dungeon 100. Yeah, I don't think there's enough here to make me want to play that. Let's see, ROD multiplier, car driving. I think we can say no to that. 2. Rod. It's probably how you probably just say rod, not ROD, as in hot rod. And we're still getting a bunch of garbage games that I'm not saying anything about because the pictures speak for themselves. It is very weird how if I can't show the pictures because it's not YouTube family friendly, I didn't have to speak 1,000 words to try and describe it, but if I can show the pictures, I can just say nah and move on, which is what I'd say for this visual novel, which I don't believe this one really has any adult content. Let's see, and then we're at our GameDeveloper.com articles. The FTC is likely to challenge Microsoft's purchase of Activision Blizzard was the report. I don't think anything has changed, so that's old news. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet surpassing 10 million sales in 3 days. Splinter Cell BBC Radio. And Microsoft says Call of Duty isn't that important actually. So those are all old news stories that once again are not getting saved. What it's got to be, come to think of it, is that I probably program my macro to open news articles a little bit further behind. But why would I have done that? Why would I have it skip back to a story we've already covered? Yeah, I'd have to look at my code, and I don't think I'm going to be doing it this weekend. Alright, and then we've got some fall list cleanup stuff here. Adam's Ascending. I think we can say no for being irrelevant and remove that off the fall list. Adam the Storyteller. Looks like it's a puzzle game. That's not that relevant, but I'll give it some more time and think about it again. Action Timing. It's rated very positively, so I can put that on the wish list. Another thing I tried to do while I was shopping is go through my wish lists and move things up that I actually care about, so that when looking at the ranked number of the 3,000 games, I'm just going to say no to that. It doesn't look terrible, it's just not relevant. And I'm not willing to give things the benefit of the doubt because of COVID anymore. Yep. So of the like 3,000 plus games on my wish list, I'm trying to get things that actually matter, that are AAA games or things I actually would like to cover, up above the top 1,000 at least, and things at the bottom being more wild and out there as an idea, as a potential idea. Some of these card games absolutely just don't make any sense paying for them, but on the other hand, if they don't have in-app purchases, paying for them maybe makes some sense. This is overwhelmingly positive at least, so I will put it on the wish list. Now inherently, when I add something to the wish list, it's going to be added at the very bottom of the wish list, so I will, in each sale, each time I look at the wish list, need to go back to the bottom of the list and start to move things up. And it's not really a rank system so much. I think I could say no to this. This feels too much like a visual novel or a cell phone game. doesn't seem like this actually is a game at all. It's more than it's an attempt at an AI assistant. Yeah, I'm gonna say no to this. Yep. If I was doing a real ranked system, I'll give this more time. I would have to start to make really tough decisions as far as whether I preferred one game in the first spot versus another game. And honestly, the games are all too different for that to really be the way anybody does it. Like, it really should be just more like a 5-star category system where 5 stars means I really want it, 4 stars I want it, 3 stars I would love to have it, 2 stars means I barely want it, and 1 star means I'll take it if it was free. I think I'm gonna say no to Aces in the Dust also. I don't know if I really ever want to play any kind of fighter pilot type game. Alright, well, let's start a duel live here and spectate. And then we're going to end up ending, I guess, fairly early because there was less going on than I thought. I did start streaming a little bit earlier today, so it is possible some news would happen on this Black Friday, but unlikely. It's possible some more games will come out on Steam, but unlikely. I can say, looking at my Twitter, it feels a little bit lighter, but not that much lighter. Some people are definitely still tweeting. Elon Musk, I think, announced a new verification system. And it's going to be like different colors based on whether you're a company, whether you're a government agency, or whether you're just an individual with a... So blue would be if you're an individual, whether you're a celebrity or not. Gray would be the color for government people, which that I guess means you have to provide a government ID of some sort. And gold would be businesses, and I think gold is probably the problem there, because the color palette doesn't make the most sense. Like, if you're going with a blue and white theme on Twitter, and gray is going to be government, which gray seems like a terrible choice for a color in the first place, then companies should probably be black, would be my guess. Go black and then gray, then blue, or play better on blue in general and maybe have contrasts to blue. It's not terrible an idea to have different systems for different types of verifications, to categorize people, or corporations versus people versus government people speaking on behalf of government. But then it's probably going to be fairly quick to make an announcement that you add more categories, because you would want to add more categories. Blue almost screams you should have a red and a green, and then red should be government, and then green should be businesses. That would make sense. Green as in greenbacks, cash, greed for businesses, and then red as in communism, I guess, and Russia as for the government. But that'd be a better color palette. But the important part that Elon Musk is promising and yet not delivering on yet is that everybody is going to be verified by real humans. So it's the exact opposite of his first idea, in which you just paid money and then you got the blue check mark, and you weren't actually being verified by anybody. So yeah, there's going to be a real verification process. Here we can see that the Xbox Series S price is down to $220 at the Amazon-owned deal site Woot, which Woot potentially could have been a much better site than it is. As somebody who follows all the deals on slickdeals.net, you get a Woot sale once in a blue moon, when if it's selling itself as having deals, you should be seeing deals on it way more. But that gets it down even more, so you're starting to see some level of competition there, or maybe even desperation there. Amazon is, I think, fairly desperate. Let's see if there's anything else on Twitter that I need to talk about. I would suspect the answer is going to be no. Let's see. The International Game Developers Association, IGDA, has a Women Life Freedom Game Jam in solidarity for the event, and a solitary event for women protesting their rights. As a group of game developers, we want to use our medium to be their voice. Learn more here. So, I think this is probably much more around the Iranian protests of being harassed by the theocracy in Iran than this is focused around the idea of, like, Roe versus Wade being overturned. They're noticeably, I don't think there were any game jams around that, but yeah, I think this is Iranian colors and that idea. This game jam is happening between December 2nd and December 4th. And IGDA is, I think, a sister company to GameDeveloper.com. Now, inherently, I do have to point out that unless they're actually raising money or in some way giving actual support to any of these women protesting, they are just being armchair quarterbacks, social justice warriors, keyboard warriors. Like, having a game jam and making video games to bring awareness of things that everybody is already aware of is not worth anybody's time or anybody's energy. Like, it's better at that level if they're not actually raising money, which game jams tend not to raise money. I've never heard of a game jam trying to raise charity or money. Women game developers, or game developers in general, would probably be better off just doing their jobs and taking some of their paycheck by keeping their jobs, or being better at their jobs, and funneling that paycheck into a real charity that is actually going to help. Although I don't know if there really is a real charity that's going to actually help Iranian women. The best thing I guess you could do, instead of trying to raise awareness and have game jams, would be to funnel it into some lobbyist group, if you could find a lobbyist group that would then potentially encourage the United States to intervene or straight up try and pressure Iran. Although there's not really a lot of chance of the United States pressuring Iran, since it was the United States CIA. It was their idea to turn a lot of the Middle Eastern countries into theocracies so that they could better control the area, so that the United States and Western companies could steal the oil and or pay very little for the oil. Yep. Inherently, the United States often comes off as the bad guys, and the CIA, in particular the FBI, often establishing itself not for the people, but acting for corporations, or for the creations of corporations and the monopolies and all of that. And certainly that is a bigger topic to talk about than I have time or interest to speak on, but like some of the conspiracy people, I'd say do your own research and investigate it. It's, I think, fairly well known that that's the case. In a lot of ways, it's often, you might even not blame the U.S. government as much as the CIA, and make an argument that the CIA has been allowed to go rogue and effectively nation build when it shouldn't have been allowed to, and should have a lot more oversight, or should have had more oversight in the past. I don't know if it has any more at the moment. But if I'm definitely not talking about video games at this point. So that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to further follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.